Welcome to Fitness or Fiction, a podcast dedicated to cutting through the hype. With me is my co-host, Curtis Howden, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what that means.
So we created this podcast specifically to start addressing issues that are a little bit bigger than just a standard answer. So a good example would be you'll see online 5 exercises that are good for your back. For me, the first thing I say is, well, you've never met my back, so let's maybe get through a little bit of the hype and the marketing and start getting into the zone of what is real and what is valuable in that, and getting a better answer instead of just a quick surfacey, this is good, this is bad.
Yeah, it's funny. With the internet, you actually said this a long time ago when you were teaching a class, probably 10 years within that gap, but you actually were teaching the class and you said, like, this is like the age of like information and technology, and who is actually going to be the filter of information, being there's just so much information out there, some good, some bad.
Yeah, I like to say that the amount of information out there is pretty similar, but the access to it is huge, and the access to actually putting it out there. Mm-hmm. So, context ends up being king, but we also deal with, well, it's not that I can't find information, it's that I have to wade through this mountain of information to find the really good stuff.
Yeah.
And that tends to be consistent. Like people like yourself, who, when you started, were dealing with a back issue so you could get back to lifting. It's not that you didn't have information, it's that you had so much. The real question is what needs to be next.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I still find that I run into situations like that constantly, and I'm a fitness professional, 10 years of experience, and I still kind of run in and bump into problems that have an abundance of information and answers, and still trying to filter through that. Like, obviously that's our job, but if it's challenging for us, it's challenging for you listening.
Yeah, that's part of the process of everybody. And one of the big things about education is your confidence level is going to go up really high, but as you get more information, the confidence level will dip again. And that's the real value of realizing that your cup is never full.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that way.
Yeah, there we go.
I definitely want to just speak for myself and everyone watching on YouTube that your arms are unusually swollen. Is that a condition or something?
It's a condition of doing less legs than I used to. Yeah.
You have upper legs now.
Well, I couldn't work the quads the same, so I'm trying to see if I can add a third head to my bicep.
Fair enough. All right, so this episode, I get to grill you, so we're going to call this one The Myth of Curtis. And
it's mythical.
I do think I know you relatively well as a person, but I definitely don't feel like I have 100% access to like your backstory and everything about you. Like we've known each other 5-8 years, something like that.
I think further on the 8 side, yeah.
Yeah, probably on the 8 side, but you can, even in that time frame, you only still know so much about a person. So
yeah,
you said when you grilled me that you're going to run it like speed. My objective is to break you down and make you cry a little bit and then build you back up and then break you down again.
If you make me cry, I have a few friends that'll never let me live it down.
Really?
Oh, don't do it. And I don't. I tell my wife I'm part of the He-Man Woman Haters Club. That's from the Little Rascals.
He-Man Woman Haters.
That's from the Little Rascals. You're too young for that.
I did watch the Little Rascals, but I don't remember anything.
Yeah, that was the club. But I tell my wife that. I'm like, I never cry, and she always catches me crying in movies and stuff.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah,
Big baby.
Yep.
Big baby.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's kind of dig into the start of this, being where do you come from? Who are you? That's an easy. We'll sum it up though. Just give me one sentence.
I grew up about 10 kilometers from here. We're in Skyview Ranch right now. I grew up in Temple in Northeast Calgary. Really, growing up in an area like that was a really good experience because you got to experience multiculturalism a lot earlier than a lot of people that I know that didn't grow up in a place like that. So for me, growing up was a really cool experience because I got to see people from all different sorts of backgrounds, and I also got into those kind of niche groups because I was involved in like computers and involved in the band, but also played most of the sports.
You were in band? What did you play?
So I started playing piano when I was in grade 1, and I played for like 19 years. I went to grade 9 classical rudiments.
Oh.
And then I played saxophone.
Me too.
I played all the way through. I actually played 2 years at the University of Calgary Big Band.
Oh, wow.
Little known fact.
Crazy.
And then in grade 12, I took up clarinet because saxophone and concert band was kind of getting easy. I played in a lot of bands, but yeah, my parents had me in a lot of stuff because I think they were afraid they would call me ADHD.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna spoiler alert, I guess, for yourself. I'm gonna tell your story, but I also know that you are like a pretty rock star diver. Me and you go swimming frequently, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm like humble humility. You're like, I'm okay diver, and then you go and do like a double front flip like into a perfect like dive, and you're like, oh, I haven't done that in like 10 years. I'm like, yeah, okay, Curtis. So yeah, what role did fitness play in your life when you were growing up, aside from the spoiler?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot of things I did. One of my best friends, his name is Curtis as well, but he spells it with a K, which is upsetting for him because it's wrong. But I guess that's more of his parents' issue. But yeah, Curtis once said to me that I'm more defined by what I don't do than what I do, because I was busy growing up. I was doing a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a lot of different bands and a lot of different sports. And exercise for me had a special place because it was always kind of my safe place, which was funny because I was always the smallest kid.
Yeah.
So like I won cities 2 years in a row in junior high for wrestling. And part of the reason I think that happened is because I was in like the 87-pound category and my brother was 200 pounds. So I was used to wrestling him on the trampoline, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, Curtis, you have to wrestle people your own weight. I was like, that's a thing?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but you know what? Early on, I was involved in baseball. That was my first thing, and I did really good at baseball. I had the fastest time between the bases, which is funny because like I was so small.
Yeah, just a little spitfire.
Yeah, like in grade 4, I was 3'10", I think. My trading card is hilarious. But yeah, baseball was the first one. I got into basketball in junior high and played on the school team and stuff like that. Wasn't that good at basketball. I was fast and I could get to the net and stuff like that, but the actual intention of the sport, I didn't get why you couldn't hit people.
Yeah.
And then I found rugby.
Mm-hmm.
And rugby was awesome. I loved rugby. I actually went and played in New Zealand when I was on my exchange for university. So diving and swimming I did in grade 11 and 12, and then I coached the diving team for 2 years after I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved away, so I couldn't anymore. But yeah, that was really cool because me and my buddy Curtis, we would always go snowboarding, and he taught me how to wakeboard, and we were always pulling flips there, and we were like, wait a second, there's a sport that you can just kind of flip around. I wouldn't say we were that good. It wasn't like high level diving. It was high school level, which I think the regular divers would probably laugh at us, but it was enough that we learned how to do some cool stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it. What do you, like, I'm just curious, like, what do you think life would have been like if you didn't have all these sports and, like, if it wasn't accessible to you? Because it's not accessible for everybody. It's a weird question, but...
Oh, that's a rough one.
We can definitely...
So I was really shy until about grade 6. And I wasn't shy in front of people that I knew, but I was actually quite quiet. And in grade 6, I kind of started feeling more confident and comfortable expressing who I was. And that's really when, like, I started excelling at sports. So for me, I drew confidence from capability.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
100.
Yeah. So I started coming out of my shell, and the place that it played for me was it was something that I knew about myself. It's kind of like knowing your inner self, and it made me more confident and comfortable expressing who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was cool. Like I was really good at a lot of sports, but then it kind of came to be when I was getting into about grade 10. I wasn't 5 feet yet. Fun fact, when I met my wife in grade 11 and she was in grade 10, we were both 5'2" and 100 pounds. So anyways, going into grade 10, I was like, well, if I want to keep playing sports, I need to get some weight on. So really in grade 10, I went from like 80 pounds to 105 pounds really quick. And then I met Sarah in grade 11 and I kept kind of exercising. But the summer of grade 9, my parents bought me a weight set. And at first I would hide that I was exercising. I would do it right before bed.
Mm-hmm.
So my brother didn't know and he wouldn't make fun of me. I don't know if he would have anyways, but for me, it was like, well, I don't know.
At that time, you felt a little off about it.
Yeah. But then all of a sudden it was kind of, Curtis is the guy that works out. It was funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, that was, for me, exercise really was just kind of, it would teach me a lot about me. And if I knew something about myself without question, I felt a lot more comfortable expressing myself to other people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like just drawing confidence from capability. I think a lot of people do that, but maybe in different avenues of life, right? Like not everyone does it through fitness, but they might do it through artistic ability or creativity or other things like that.
Yeah, I think everyone has their outlets. It's interesting for me, though, if you want to get to know more about someone, you go and do a workout with them. You're going to find out aspects of their personality. And it might not be all-encompassing for everything else that they do, but it's a really interesting thing, like the way that they communicate with themselves and express who they are. It really gives you kind of a view into kind of where they're at.
Yeah. So, yeah, just that mental chatter. So that was like you talked about going into university. Like, what were you studying in university? Because it wasn't always your intention to be a personal trainer.
I was kind of, so in high school, I was a little bit of a gym rat. I really liked it. And I wanted to go into personal training. I wanted to do their 1-year program at Mount Royal. Mm-hmm. They weren't a university yet. Spoiler alert, I'm kind of old. But for me, I was like, no, I need to do something that's like a real career, which is horrible to say now. Like,
oh, it's still out there though. The
I know
stigma.
It's out there, but I was involved in that. So anyways, I think my parents would have been okay with that, but I felt this draw to go to university, so I did, and I started in business, and I hated it. I was like,
why?
Well, I felt like I had more to offer the world, and my view on it wasn't the program. It was my view on it was like, I'm just learning how to make money. And for me, I just couldn't get behind it. Mm-hmm. So like my first 2 years of university, I really didn't like. And then the last semester of the second year, I took all Kines courses in the spring semester, and I got A's and A pluses in all of them.
Just interesting to you, just all the
information. I really engaged in it. I loved it. And one of the courses was Introduction to Leadership, and I aced all of those, and that got me into U of A for their education phys ed program. Mm-hmm. And so I had very little notice and moved up to U of A for my education, majoring in phys ed and minoring in social studies. Actually, not everyone knows that.
Oh, I definitely do.
Yeah.
You just shoot out the most random facts sometimes.
Yeah, when we talk about like political spectrums or yeah, we do that. Yeah.
So, like, that's kind of your university, your education, stuff like that. Where was the shift though, where you actually, there was like, we're missing a piece in there?
So in my second year of university, I realized that I hated what I was doing, and I was like, okay, so how do I make it better? Like, I need a solution. So I applied to get into education, but throughout that time, that was right around the time where I had a car accident. It was a T-bone car accident, and I was with a buddy of mine. And I came away from that accident thinking I was okay, but then I started getting these weird, like, shooting pains down my left leg and my left arm. Mm-hmm. And it was a real pain because... Yeah, it was a real pain because nobody could see that anything was wrong, and it wasn't always there. It would be like I'd do something wrong, and I could barely walk down the hill to go see the chiro. Mm-hmm. And that sucks. Like when you're 19 years old and you have that sort of pain. And my chiro was like, yeah, you've got like 5 discs that are not happy and bulged. And so I started seeing physio and massage and whatever else, and they were all saying like, at the time, I was getting the message all the time. My doctor was like, yeah, this is a degenerative condition. Mm-hmm. And I hated that I couldn't do things that I once could without fear of reprisal. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking into how to fix it. And then in that time, I ran into a guy named Rob Anger, spelled the usual way, Anger.
Angry.
Yes. And he looked at me and said something that was pretty life-changing, actually. It was, well, instead of talking about where you're going to be in a bad way or what you can't do right now, let's start talking about what you can do and building on that. And it seems so stupid, like it seems so simple, but that's what I needed to hear. He started showing me how to move better, and he started teaching me Shaolin martial arts. And it took him about 4 months to get me back to things. I was playing rugby again, I was wrestling again, and I decided, you know what, this is the impact I want to have on people. So I go up to U of A. I still studied from a distance doing Shaolin and stuff like that, but having that taken away and given back to me, I was like, that's the impact I want. So I went through my degree, and coming out of my degree, I started teaching, and I was a substitute teacher at Glenmore Christian School. And I found out really early that, did you know you can get called into the principal's office as a teacher? Yeah, I let the students.
I guess the principal's your boss?
Yeah. I didn't expect it. It was weird, but like I let the students search with their phones about nuclear war because that's what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And I got in trouble because they're not allowed to use their phones.
Gotcha.
But it was like a really engaged conversation, and I actually felt like I was connecting with them and whatever else. But a lot of my experience was just stepping in and like teaching kids about badminton and stuff like this. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. Like, I want to have a bigger impact on people.
Yeah.
So in that same year, I had started training, and I was doing that. I got my first gig training in July. It was July 5th, 06.
I just graduated.
Yeah. Yeah.
From high school.
Yeah. You're a child. But yeah, I did that for a year. I ran into Sarah in September. We went on our first date, September 19th, 06.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we got married August 11th, 07. That was way faster than I thought it would have ever been.
It took me 10 years, but you know what? Who's counting?
Yeah, mine was 11 months. I didn't ever think it would go that way, but that's a story for another time. But for me, once I started doing that, I stopped substituting, and when we went up to Edmonton for Sarah to go to school. And that was go time. It was like, okay, well, now I'm really adulting. We have our own place. We're in our own city. And I got to make sure that I can get Sarah through school and whatever. And that's when I really engaged and saw what I could do in training. And for me, I never turned back. That was 06, and I worked for the same company until this April. And it was a choice at the time because I wanted to give people what Rob had given me, which was hope again. Like it was horrible, the way that they would medicalize and talk about the issue that I had going on. So once I took that back, it was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I never taught again in the traditional environment. I've done lots of teaching, but I haven't gone back to the school system.
Mm-hmm. So you got into the industry. You became a trainer at this company. Yeah. And what was like, because we already talked about what my first year was, and we know like I struggled more so. Again, I think my challenge in my first year, again, was confidence, right? So I struggled for the first year and a half. What did your first, 1, 2, 3 years start to look like? Did you have any obstacles that were in your face, challenging?
Yeah, the big thing for me was reaching out for new clients. Like it was foreign to me to talk to somebody in the idea that it's like, okay, well, I would like you as a client. And the way that I kind of overcame that, I had started with my buddy Josh Diesel. He was known as Josh Martin at the time, but he's over 300 pounds, so we started calling him Diesel. Mm-hmm. And that's a thing now. But yeah, between me and him, we discovered really early that you need to share what you're trying to do with people so that you can feel comfortable sharing it with people, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I started playing around with this idea of physical freedom. And you'll hear me say it all the time because I started in 06 saying this, and it was, what I do is I help people realize, attain, and regain their physical freedom. And that has a lot of different ways that you can go with it. But for me, once I realized this is my focus, this is my why, then all of a sudden I had the ability to start saying, listen, I want to give you this. And I didn't feel like I was asking for people's money anymore, even if that was the case, because my goals were far beyond that, and the value was so much greater than any cost. And once I engaged in that, my first year was really nothing to write home about. And that was also the time where I was courting Sarah. Is courting a thing? I can say courting. Yes.
Were you born in the 40s? Sure.
Yes. 43, we'll call it. 45, let's say 45, right when the war ended. But
social studies.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But the big thing for me was when we got to Edmonton and it was kind of go time. It wasn't learning the craft anymore. I felt like, with my buddy Diesel and my boss at the time was really supportive. His name was Ross Lynch. But I had really kind of learned what needed to happen. And my big thing was, I want to do this for more people. The physical freedom thing, helping people realize, attain, and regain their physical freedom was a big deal. But I also wanted to get that out to a certain amount of people because I knew that there were other people like me that felt like they had it taken away from them and didn't know what to do next.
Yeah.
And my background was teaching 30 people at a time. So I started doing an abs class, and then I started doing group training, and group training was a big deal for me because I could have 2 and 3 people in front of me, and that exponentially changed how I could impact their lives, or the amount of people that I could at least. And so that year I really kind of demonstrated for the company what group training could look like. And I was very busy. I had a really big impact. I still have some really good relationships with the people from that time.
Yeah.
And it was a really big kind of breakout time for me. I got the top trainer award that year, which meant something to me, not because of the award, but because of the amount of people that I was able to help.
That was in your first or second year? Or?
That was my second year. We moved up to Edmonton, and I started at White Mud.
So you were already thriving on year two. Year two, you started to feel like more set in your...
Yeah, year two, I got top trainer.
Yeah.
So that was cool, and I became assistant manager that year as well. So that was 2008. I became assistant manager.
Mm-hmm.
And from 2008 to 2021, I was managing people. And
see, the top trainer thing to me, like, I'm like a little salty towards business and money. Don't spit out your coffee. Salty towards business and money. Like, when I think of top trainer, I think about like most sales and crap like that. I'm not assuming that that's how you approached it. That's not how you weren't like, oh man, I gotta get me some sales.
Yeah. No. For me, it was way different. Like every number that they were keeping track of was a person to me.
Yeah.
And really, like I was boxing with a guy named Paul Anthony, and he had been the top guy for years. And
he's a big boy in Calgary.
Yeah, really, really good at what he does. Really good at sales, and for me, the way that I was able to keep up with him, he was charging more than me. Mm-hmm. He'd been a trainer way longer than me. The only way that I was able to keep up with him was that I was focused on helping more people, period. The payments involved in that, I didn't even know that I was in the running until the last month or so. And then after that, I was like, well, no. And I had my manager at the time came up to me and said, listen, I've seen what you do with your people. You should show that you can be number one on service.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. And the best compliment I got was from a buddy of mine named John Sinclair. And he came up to me at the party. I had sunglasses on because I had just had LASIK because I had glasses before that.
Nerd.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm wearing glasses right now.
You're like, freak.
Oh, geez, take these off.
Yeah. No, but John Sinclair came up to me, and I just got my award, and I had my sunglasses on. The flashes were just the worst because I had my surgery like earlier that day. It was horrific. But
yeah.
We can talk about the experience of that. I felt like Wolverine. I was going to kill everyone in the room. I should have taken it.
Yeah, that all sounds terrifying. I don't like eyeball stuff.
No. When they cut it and they pull the flap, it's for another time. But anyways, John Sinclair comes up to me and he shakes my hand, and he was like, listen, it's really good to see somebody do this the way that you did. And for me, that was huge because he's one of the guys that I technically beat, but I went up to that club in the first place because I wanted to learn from him because he was teaching courses at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that award was big for me and really catapulted my opportunities down the road to take on the director of continuing education. They called it the dean. I still
the dean of education.
Oh man, it just
indubitably.
Yeah, it sounds like that. You're right.
You kept a monocle on your desk
and a top hat and a cane.
Perfect.
Yeah, just in case.
Yeah.
It was either me or Mr. Peanut, and nobody could tell who. But anyways, yeah. So that was my first year. The second year, I moved back down to Calgary, took on my first club, which was Sunridge World Health, right where I started.
Yeah.
Managed there for a while, and we were the top club, and then I got moved over to Edgemont, which was the flagship. And I was there from, was it 2010 to 2021.
Yeah.
So, and the process there was first I took over the Dean of Continuing Education.
Indeed. Yeah.
No.
Fat cats.
And then that was a big deal for me because it was doing education on my own terms.
Yeah.
And every time I taught a course, I got better at relaying the information, which I found was a really good thing for my clients. And then shortly after that, in 2014, I got the regional director position. And that meant that I could go around the region and actually teach the trainers courses. Mm-hmm. And I would go and run their business development meetings, which was a lot of, here's how to be a better trainer. Now here's how you apply it to your clients. Mm-hmm. And there's this dichotomy when you're running a service industry kind of gig like personal training or fitness, where a business's main thing is, can they take on revenue to survive and thrive?
Yeah.
But the way that you generate that and how you treat your people was always paramount importance to me. Mm-hmm. So having time to spend with people and get to know them was was one of the coolest parts. And one of the hardest parts was when the relationships wouldn't go exactly how we wanted, whether that was due to policy or an oversight on my part, or if they weren't really willing to learn and move forward. Or...
Yeah, I don't think everybody is meant to jive together. I think most people can find a way to kind of be cohesive with one another, but I don't think every single person is meant to just click and fit into situations.
No, and there's also a lot of different situations that come up. Like, there was one where I had reached out to some people in the region to say, hey, be part of our photo shoot. And that was my involvement. I was reaching out to people that I knew saying, like, come, like, we want a nice diverse group of people to do a shoot with and whatever. And there was one guy that they didn't use a lot of his pictures because he was really muscular. And
he was too jacked for the...
The marketing department told me, it's a little bit more aggressive of a look than we want. So they didn't use too many of his pictures. And I didn't even really realize that. And he approached me and said, how come they're not? Like, what a waste of my time. And I was like, yeah, no, let me ask them about it. And that was kind of what I got back. And it wasn't my choice what pictures were used, but yeah, that was one of those circumstances. It was really hard because I don't think that he ever really got the message that, like, I wasn't involved in the selection of pictures or anything. Yeah. I was involved in saying, hey, these people are really good to use for the photo shoot. So that's an example of some of the hard things about it, because he took it a certain way and assigned who could have been at fault. Yeah. And for me, it was like, no, man, I'm not involved there. That was one of those ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of, you already just opened up the full book and read it to us, but, yeah, like, so I'm going to ask you anyways, what do you feel was your favorite role out of all of those?
The time that I felt most well utilized is when I was teaching. So,
is that regional director, or is that the dean of continuing education? Because I'm going to say, like, obviously you're one person, you were doing essentially both jobs, but I'm still going to say that the jobs were slightly different. Like, if we kind of dissected your regional director tasks and your continuing education tasks, like, I'm just going to separate them. So,
yeah. Well, at the time it was I wouldn't call it worse than that. It was bigger than that, because I was still running Edgemont as well. And that came along with its own challenges too, not being in that club all the time. Mm-hmm. And when the staff needed more support, they had my co-manager there, but they wanted me there. So that came with some challenges not being there all the time. But when I look at all three roles, like the fitness manager role, the regional director role, and the education role, the regional director role was actually my favorite. And the reason was because I felt like I could actually engage with the people better, because you can only know somebody so well after teaching them a day-long class.
Yeah, I feel like, obviously, I was a manager of a team. I had a relatively large team. It fluctuated up and down over the years, but I can definitely speak for myself and others that most people I know say that you're a pretty exceptional teacher. Like, you do a rock star job of teaching. We loved, like, all the content that you taught us. It was, oh, see, you're gonna cry. No,
I'm not gonna cry.
Yeah, so just, I understand though, because I attended some of your courses, and the vibe at your course is completely different than when you're at the club. When you're at the club, it was more of like a team unit, and there was like, it just felt more personable versus going to a course, a circle personable.
Not like a triangle, no corner.
No. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So when you're teaching a course, it's different. The vibe's different. Like if I go to a course that you're teaching, there's a bunch of people that I may not know, so you feel a little bit less comfortable, I would say, versus being at your home club, home base, and being like getting the education being brought to you.
Yeah, that was bomb. I have some pictures that you actually took. One of them is my main banner on Facebook, was a picture you took of me teaching your team. Mm-hmm. Those are really fond memories for me, because not only was I getting to teach people that, but I'd actually get to coach them on how to use it in the future and answer their questions after the course was done. But I like to call it like medication, like doses. Like, I like to have a potent dose. I do like that, but doing that with a course and not being able to follow up and support after it, it's a big limitation in education. Mm-hmm. Like for me, I really liked getting to know who somebody was and support them through their challenges. And a lot of the coaching that we did with our staff when we were most successful was things that they wanted to do personally. Like, how does work fit into what you're trying to do, as far as your schedule, as far as your the clients you're trying to reach, and all that sort of stuff. That was the spot where I was like, you know what, this is where I'm best utilized. And if I had my way, I would have been in the clubs more than I was. And I always fought to be in the clubs as much as I could.
Yeah.
But the biggest challenge, if I were to look at that, it's like, well, what role was the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge was being spread thin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't feel like I could really fully engage in one thing because I had so many things to look after.
Hold on, that was my next question. What was your biggest challenge? Being spread too thin. Okay, carry on. Good.
Once I took on too many things, like I was teaching courses, which is kind of a separate thing, but every time I taught a course, that was a day that I had to make up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then every time I was in another club, that was good, but I wasn't full regional director. I was also the manager of Edgemont, which is a beast of a club, and 40 trainers on the team at its height. But when I started feeling like I couldn't get everything in, like that was the part that was the hardest, because I really wanted to engage and do things the best that I could, but it ended up being a scenario where I felt that for a long time, and it ended up having some detrimental effects, because keep in mind, throughout all this period, I was doing competitive Olympic lifting too, so it ended up being a real interesting balancing act. I would have up to 9 workouts a week from 2009 onward, and I was still juggling all of that, and that took its toll on me, I think.
Yeah, I could definitely speak from, like, I think we've talked about this before, but like I felt like you were hard to access because you were spread so thin, and I was like, man, this is tough. Like, just I ended up creating my own workaround for it when I needed you. I basically just compiled everything. I was like, Curtis is going to be here on Wednesday, and I'm going to slap him with everything that's on my plate rather than spit it to you throughout the week, because I didn't think that was efficient for myself or for you, because you were spread thin. So I was able to find a workaround. I don't know if everybody else was able to find those workarounds. They kind of wanted it to work a certain situation and have it be like this seamless process, and in my head, I was like, Curtis operates this way, so I'm just going to operate with him, and it was able to be a little bit more cohesive, I think.
Well, but that's why we jive so good, because you were like, well, this is where you're at. I'm going to try to adapt to that. And what we would do is be like, check, clear it up, and then next week do anything else. And that actually worked really good for me. But yeah, that was a consistent battle. And, later on, after my diagnosis and everything, it ended up being something that I really had to look at and be like, okay, so what favors am I doing myself? Because even in weightlifting, I was really good at pushing. I was really great at that, but resting and relaxing is not my strong suit.
Yeah, I think that's a consistent battle for anybody, though, who is like family driven. Like, I think you're socially, like, I think obviously you have like family, friends, recreational activities, try to spend time with the boys. Like, even right now, like, it's still easy to be spread thin just by trying to be a functioning / successful adult. And before you get too further, because you kind of just going page by page here, we talked a lot about the positives. I didn't really get what's the biggest challenge during your role. And I'm not looking for a salt fest here. We're not looking to pour like negativity all over the place. Just something so we have an idea.
Yeah, I think the being spread thin thing is one of those things. So my intention was always to take care of people.
Mm-hmm.
And later on in my tenure, as I dealt with my own challenges and whatever else, I didn't always feel like I had the space to take care of people the way I wanted.
Mm-hmm. And
that was the hardest thing, because I really do love people. Like, even to this day, I reach out to people that I haven't seen in a while and say, hey, let's grab coffee. They're like, oh, is there anything you want to go over? I'm like, no, I'm just curious to see how you're doing. That's it.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest challenge. And I'd probably put it somewhere between that and recovery, because I got into the habit of doing a lot all the way from university. So when I started having problems with my leg, I think it was 2014 or 15, and they sold me that it was my hip, and I'm like, but I've rehabbed people's hip labrums lots before. Like, I've done that, and it's not responding. And it took me 4 years of not being able to run and really having to leave the sport that I loved, like Olympic lifting was really great for me. Like I was really proud of what I did, and my coach is like my grandpa. My firstborn's name is William Henrik, and it's because Henrik Gregorian was my weightlifting coach, and he was like my grandpa. But it was hard having the whole thing go on with my leg and my hip, and that was a road that, you know, you can look at bad things happen, and I hate it when people say bad things happen for a reason, because you look at somebody who's just had a miscarriage or something like this, and it's like, oh man, that's not a nice thing to say, but we can just say that bad things do happen.
Yeah, for me, from the outsider's perspective looking in, like I was going to ask you about this because you did say, like, you know, 2 minutes ago, you mentioned diagnosis, and we haven't really dug into that yet. But when I first met you, you were already experiencing his hip issues, but I was still blown away because you were still one of the strongest people in the room. And I was like, this dude's hip's messed up, and he's still like, he's stronger than me, and I was decently strong once we got my back put together. Not like I was the monster in the room, but I was like, man, like this guy's really strong. Mentally, like I would say your mental strength overbeats your physical strength, but it was unique for me to watch you like destroy me on absolutely everything and still have like, you were still injured. You weren't at 100%. I was like, man, at this point, once we rehab my back, I was like, I'm at 100% and we're building, and I felt like positive. I was like, man, we're going up and up and up, and the sky's the limit here. But I was like, this guy is just always like 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of me, depending what we were doing. You know, I can beat you on some tiny, like some small stuff. You know,
You got me on handstands.
I've got some stuff under my belt, but yeah, like at that point when we were working together, I was like, man, like you used to show me videos of you lifting and things like that, like some of your big lifts. I can't remember what you did. Was it 315? I don't know. You had some weight overhead. I don't know how much it was. But Henrik told you to drop it. Do you remember this video?
Yeah, it's on Facebook.
He's like, yeah, you're like, you had it overhead. Henrik's like, okay, drop it. And you're just like, I just brought it down slow. And he's like, oh, yeah. I was like,
yeah, that was 150 jerk for 2.
Yeah.
So that's 330 pounds. But yeah, that's a whole other bag of worms. I don't know how much we want to talk about that. But yeah, so like
for me, it's weird seeing one of the strongest people I know expecting him to fix himself. I'm like, it's going to get, like, I thought it was just waiting. I was like, you fix me. I was like, he's going to fix himself, and it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, that was a real kick in the face. So 2 years ago in March, I had talked to my brother. I was like, listen, I've been struggling with this for 5 years. I need you to reach out to your network, because he's a pharmacist. I said, I need you to talk to some doctors. I need to figure out what's wrong with this thing, because I came out of the steam room and I could barely get my clothes on. And this neurologist named Scott Jarvis, he reached out and he was like, yeah, I'll see you. So I went in to see him, and he assessed me. He's like, this doesn't seem like MS or anything, but there's something going on. So he got me in for an MRI within 10 days. And I had waited for my hip for like 2 years.
Yeah.
I was like, uh-oh. So yeah, I went in and he had me back in like right away, and he sat me down, and we just had Lucas. And so Sarah was holding Lucas, and he was like, yeah, you have MS. And that was like right when we were sitting down. It was kind of hard. So you look at him and you're trying to figure out, what does that mean? Because all you picture is people in wheelchairs. And I know a guy that he's had MS for a while, and he really has a hard time walking. And that's all I pictured. And for me, I'd always been so capable and worked to get more capable that it was really hard. Like that was not easy news. I took a few days off over that one. That was, yeah. But, you know, it was interesting. Like when I started work in 2006, I missed my first 2 days because I couldn't even leave the toilet. If I turned my head, I would puke. They called it acute labyrinthitis, an inner ear infection. My neurologist looked back, and he was asking me, oh, did you have ear pain? Did you have this? Did you have that? And I'm like, no. He's like, yeah, that was your onset. So every contest that you did in weightlifting, when you set the provincial record, when you were qualifying for nationals, when you were getting your medal at nationals, you did all of that with MS. And for me, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I accomplished that. It was hope. It was like, well, So you say I have more voids in my brain and down my spine than you can count. So my function doesn't line up with that. But because of what because of what I've done and what I've been doing, I have hope. That was a big deal for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, after that, I changed my diet, tried keto for a while, felt pretty good. Tried vegan, felt horrible. Then I learned about gluten and dairy and some of the interactions that can happen neurologically, and been doing gluten-free and dairy-free and trying to get this left leg back.
Like a hippie.
Yeah, eat like a hippie. That's what I like to say. Nothing against them. It's just...
Float on through, brother.
Oh, it's so weird. I used to order my pizzas with extra gluten.
Yeah.
So...
I used to do the same stupid shit, and now
yeah.
I don't really say anything.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, man. That's a heavy diagnosis. I feel like that's almost its own episode if it becomes one down the road, whether you would want that or not. But I still feel like I'm personally in like denial of it. Like, I don't know where you sit with everything, but it's unbelievable to me to see like the strongest. And then if I tell anybody that you're battling this, they're like, what? Really? Like, that is the healthiest person we all know. Like, why has this happened to him? It makes me very aware of my own mortality, and I don't like to think about it because I don't like being upset and I don't like feeling sad. So I kind of just push those thoughts down. I don't just push them down. Yeah, it's terrible, man. But
yeah,
if anyone can do it, like if anyone can make the best of a bad situation, I've seen you do it multiple times, whether it was smaller than this or it's bigger than this. Like, I think you have the right head on your shoulders to be able to handle whatever's thrown at you. I have faith in you for that reason, and I think that makes you stronger with all the people behind you.
Yeah, you know, Sarah often talks about you don't need to be what you were for the kids to love you. And like it's really interesting. Like, if you ask my kids about me, they do Olympic lifting with me. They don't know what I was like as an athlete, and I had in my head that I had to show them that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was strength. But if you ask them about me, they're not gonna mention lifting. Like, that was an expression for me, but for them, like, they just want me there.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting thing to wrestle with, because it's something that I have to go through like on the daily, and people won't see most of it because they don't know that I have to think about how I'm lifting my leg up the stairs and things like this. So it's kind of like a silent battle. And most people, when you say, you know, MS or something like this, they're like, well, sorry, what is that? Like, I don't get it. And nor should they. It's not their issue. It's fine. But it's kind of more of the same in some ways. Like, when I had my back issue, it was, people couldn't really see what was going on. So like, yeah, he's fine. And with this, it's a mental trip more than a physical trip in some ways, because on days where it's too hot, I have a really hard time functioning. And so I take aspirin, or I'll have like a ton of water, or, you know, there's a few other supplements you can do to help with heat tolerance. But when I'm really struggling, it's not something you want to put in other people's faces either and be like, yo, I'm having a hard time. Or like a walk that ends up getting too long that my leg isn't really working well anymore. It's not something you want to mention.
Yeah.
So, but for me, it's a necessary part to mention in the journey, because it's like, yeah, well, my career was doing this and whatever else, and then this happened. And for me, that was kind of a turning point, because I needed to look at, what am I doing for the long game? Like, I can't keep pushing the way that I've been pushing.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to get rest? How am I going to make sure that I'm protecting my future self for my kids?
Yeah.
So that was a big deal.
For me, like, again, I've said it to your face now, whether I did it or not in the past. Like I said, like, you're one of the strongest people I know. And for me, one of the lessons that you've taught me that sticks with me, honestly, is one of them unrelated. It's just problem solving. I know when I have a problem, I just objectively look at it and strategize how to fix it. I just told you an issue of my dog getting in a fight, and my dog got in a dog fight. I got upset. The first thing I did was come home, and I sat in my chair and closed my eyes, and I had a conversation with myself, and I was able to resolve being upset and strategize solutions going forwards, and then I wasn't upset for the rest of the night. That was a big win for me, to be able to just have that emotional and like mental clarity. But for me, if I tell stories about you to people, whether it's now or in the future, it's probably like, your physical strength always comes up. That's a given. But for me, your mental toughness or like mental stability is honestly probably the bigger one. Like being like in the face of adversity, still having a positive outlook and not letting it tear you down. Because there's so many things in life that can tear us down and make us feel like crap. And it's something I'm really trying to work on this year, being complaining about stupid things. Like, oh, it's too hot, so I'm going to be in a bad mood. Or, oh, I'm hungry, so I'm going to be in a bad mood. Like, like little things like this can throw people off, especially when we're so used to so much excess comfort now. And I think that's probably one of the strongest lessons that you've taught me is I've learned to, like, when I complain about something stupid, I try to stop it immediately. And like you're in my brain, and like the lessons that you've taught me and that I've seen from you, like we were in LA and you just got the nastiest food poisoning. And if I was like, man, if I got that food poisoning, I would be like a big child. I would be a wreck. And I wouldn't have been like, it would have been a bad experience for me, but I probably would have made it a bad experience for you too. And then you would have looked back on this LA trip and been like, man, Eric got sick and it was so rough. Like he was, man, like, I understand the dude was sick and I felt bad for him, but like I probably would have milked it more than I should have. And when you got sick and food poisoning, like you were just like cracking jokes like this like crazy person. You'd go to a garbage can and like puke and come back and like tell a joke and you're all mangled, but like you're still, to me, there's a book, I think you're aware of it. It's called The 4 Agreements.
Yeah.
So the 4 agreements, one of those agreements, we can talk about that another day, but one of those agreements is do your best. And I've been experiencing some stomach problems this past year, and it's held me back some days. And other days, I look at one of those agreements, and I think you're a pinnacle of it, and that's that agreement of do your best, regardless of where you stand. And it says do your best today, and that your best changes from time to time. Your best is not your PR Olympic lift, your record that you hit. Your best is like, what do you got today? Like, what do you got to offer today? And I think that's probably one of your strongest traits, that every day you can approach it with your best, regardless of whether you're having a flare-up or whatever's the situation, you know what I mean? To me, that's probably your greatest strength.
Well, that's very, very kind of you. That's, in a lot of ways, the whole getting kicked in the face, we'll call it, the whole experience has really been this scenario where it's like, yeah, well, it's guaranteed that you're going to have some sort of challenge in life, like period. And regardless of how big it is, like usually you and I talk about qualifying a challenge. It's like, okay, so let's put that in perspective. Let's try to find where people could be at. Oh yeah, I didn't get to eat this food that I wanted. Well, that guy over there is dealing with something way worse. Like if we qualify it, it usually comes back to be like not that big of a deal. But the whole thing for me is making the best of what you've got, because we're like, life is not the easiest thing, and none of us are making it out alive. So,
and something that resonates with me is tomorrow's not guaranteed, but everybody's living like it is.
Yeah, but that's what makes it good, right? So, like if you look at living life, there's no meaning if nothing could ever happen to you. Like if there's no consequence, if there's no challenge, there's no beauty. If there's permanence, then nothing can happen. Whereas impermanence and imperfection and thriving in spite of that is where the beauty comes in life. Like, just spending time with my kids. Like I posted the other day my kids were so excited to get out and pump the gas. It's like, yeah, how many times you're like, oh, damn, I got to do this.
Gotta go get gas.
Yeah, meanwhile, it's like, Daddy, can I get out and help? Yeah, you can do the whole thing if you want. Yay!
Yeah.
It's like, oh, man, like, because life is impermanent and improbable, that's really where a lot of the excitement comes from.
Yeah. So I have a lot of hippie moments lately, like our aha moments when I'm walking in nature. I feel like I've been cooped up in the gym so much for the past 10 years. We used to do long days, man.
That's true.
And like even today, I was just walking around. There's like a little like lake reservoir over there, or whatever, a little pool of water.
Lake of War.
And I was like, man, there's so many dragonflies out. Like, this is crazy. And I was just like watching the insects. And to me, it was almost like being a child again, where it was kind of beautiful just to look at something so just small, but appreciate it. And I'm like, nobody else is appreciating this right now except for me. So I've had a lot of those aha moments, which I think is good. It's just kind of resetting things back into perspective to
for sure.
have a more positive outlook. But to get back on track, I guess.
We went really off the rails there, yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah.
So like, where are you at now, and why are you still in the fitness industry?
So, yeah, basically going through all the different roles that I've had and everything, I was responsible for a lot of work product and a lot of people, and I loved that. But I got to a point where, there's been a lot of stuff go on with the company that we were working at, but before that, I had approached my boss and said, listen, I need to stop. Like, I need to resign. And that resignation for me was a big deal because it meant changing the relationships that I had with a lot of people. And shortly after that, we discovered a bunch of other stuff that was going on financially and whatever. And I had quit 6 days before all of that hit. I had no idea about it. But where I'm going now is, I started an online business 6 years ago. I found it really exciting, the fact that I can reach more people and have more input for more people, which really, that's where the podcast comes in, is I actually want to continue to help people realize, attain, and regain their physical freedom. And I started Howden Movement Academy, and that is really about meeting with people and being their expert to take them where they want to go. And for me, being the expert is something that I didn't really like before, but I do want people to come and say, like, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, and try to get to the meat and potatoes of it and say, okay, listen, losing 20 pounds in 12 weeks is good in most cases. In most cases. You can't just say it's good. Mm-hmm. But let's say, I put on 20 pounds in COVID, I want to take it off. Okay, that's probably a good idea. Probably. But the bigger thing for me is the long-term transformation. Like, can we teach this person how to deal with stress, whether it's physical stress like exercise or their day-to-day life or whatever else? Can we give them the tools? So instead of, hey, my hip hurts and my doctor says I need surgery, it's like, okay, have you trained that joint? And I run my mobility class twice a week via Zoom. And I have people that are across the country and in different countries coming to that class or getting the recording of it, because I can actually teach them, here's your joint, here's what it needs. And once I get to know them and start seeing what their issues are, it's really exciting what can be accomplished. And I posted earlier this week on my client, Derek, and he was declared physically disabled permanently by 2 physiatrists. And he came to see me and he was like, well, I'm not sure that I can do anything, but I want to try something. And I was like, man, you're my guy. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. And he owns a cement company now. He lays cement for a living and doesn't complain about his back. He's lost a whole pile of weight, which is an awesome byproduct. He did that mostly on his accord by changing his diet. Mm-hmm. But what I'm doing now is trying to get out to more people than I thought that I had a big network with the company. And every time I taught a trainer something, they could teach their clients. And I plan on still doing training mentorship. And I'm probably going to do my first intake late in August. But trainer mentorship is something that I've always loved because it's a denser expression. Once you teach that trainer, they can exponentially help other people. Yeah. But continuing to see clients myself and sharpen that skill set is something that's really important for me. So this year I've engaged in education more than most, which is, I always do education every year, but this year I've really engaged in it to try to get across more value for my clients, figure out how to serve them better. And then the next step is really working with personal trainers. And in the future, I do have some other plans for things that are, they're in the works. I think that it'll probably be something in the new year, but it's a matter of, how else can I serve people? Because for me, the impact that you have while you're here is really all that you have. Like, you don't get to take any of this stuff with you. Mm-hmm. So like when I hear you were the difference, it's like, yeah, that's why I do what I do. That's why I didn't leave the industry when a lot of people did. You get to like your 5 years and it's like, when are you going to get a big boy job? It's like, I have a big boy job. I'm actually impacting the world one person at a time. I'm not going and doing spreadsheets for an oil company, which there's nothing wrong with. But for me, I see it as a higher calling. And what I do, I see it as a calling and not a job. So that's why I've continued to engage in it.
Yeah, the big boy job thing, that's a big one too. But
yeah, that's a we'll have to talk about that another time. That's a cultural thing. It's really interesting.
Yeah, very much so. With the whole education system and everything.
Yeah, that gets to be a big topic.
So, how was your grilling?
I thought you did good.
Successfully.
You got close to making me cry though.
Are you medium rare? You almost made me cry. So.
Yeah, I didn't expect to get that deep. Like this is episode 2, so.
Deep like. Gross.
That's a dodgeball reference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Watch dodgeball. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I think it was good. Where are we going with our future episodes, my friend? What's episode 3?
So episode 3. So episode 3. We're going to be talking more about what we're trying to do with this podcast. So, in my view, like you start a podcast, and it's how good are you going to be talking to people that aren't here? It's really dialogue between you and me, but where we want to go from here is actually cutting through the hype, meaning we're going to have to talk about, what is this podcast all about? And we're going to have to get into that next time. And then after that, it's literally pick a topic and start pulling it apart. And for me, pulling a topic apart isn't like, this is true, this is facts, because the world doesn't work that way. It's not just this black and white sort of thing. So you'll see all of these things like, what's the best rep range for muscle gain? And I'm like, well, what was the last stimulus you were using for your workout? And it's like, well, what do you mean stimulus? It's like, yeah, see, so that's how broken the educational system is.
People want the quick fix. We have TikTok now, and you can get entertainment and information in 15-second blasts. So they just want what's like easy. Their brain don't have to think and just...
Yeah, and for me, I think the easiest way to say it is, you talk about fitness or fiction, cutting through the hype. The big thing is this is a dialogue, and if somebody's willing to look for more, I want to give them a good source to come and look and understand. So some of the topics I want to cover are, okay, tempo in training. What if your program doesn't have tempo? Let's talk about that. Stimulus. What are we talking about with exercise stimulus? A lot of people, it's like, well, I do 3x10 at the gym. And you say, okay, cool. Why? Well, because it's toning. Well, toning means your muscle is turned on. And if that's the case consistently, you've got a problem. I'm actively trying to avoid that on my left side. So really like what's being sold versus what you're actually doing doesn't line up. And that's really where I want to come in and provide a place where people can actually look and say, okay, well, they're getting into it a little bit deeper for my understanding so that I can actually make qualified decisions. And it comes back to me to developing a more discerning fitness consumer. I don't want people to go online and be like, oh, that person has a 6-pack, so they must know what to do for me. Because I often say I've had a 6-pack since I was 7 and I didn't know anything about fitness then. So yeah, providing an escape from the mountains of content that come out every day now.
Yeah.
So
I think we should wrap this baby up. Do you want to maybe plug your Instagram? What's the best way? If somebody wants to ask a question or dig into our topics in the future, where's the best place to reach you?
So CoachCurt.h is my Instagram. I have Howden Movement Academy as well, but I think CoachCurt.h is probably the best place to go.
Curt is C-U-R-T.
Yeah.
Mine is Eric.Berge at Instagram.
Not even going to let me ask you the question.
Go ahead.
What is your Instagram? I want to hear about how to get in touch with you.
Eric.Berge. Or if you prefer to just email our podcast.
Berg with an E. Don't forget the E.
Yeah, B-E-R-G-E. The email for our podcast, though, is fitnessorfictionpodcast@gmail.com. That is a giant email, but it's the best I could do.
Yeah, there you go.
There was a lot of them, so.
But, on that topic, like, subscribe, this is one of those things that we're trying to do and commit to doing more. So we need to know that it's making an impact to engage like that. So
100%. We would love some feedback, love some emails or some Instagram messages. And even
questions that you want covered. That's going to be a big part. I don't want this to just be like, here's our topic or else.
This is what we decided to talk about.
Yeah. And a lot of what I see on my Facebook and the questions that I ask, I get some really interesting feedback. And I think that engaging with that content and speaking it through is going to be a good thing.
Cool. Well, great chat. Hopefully everyone knows you a little bit better, Meow.
Yeah, maybe too good. Sorry.
All right. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys later.
Like, subscribe. We'll see you next week.